session. All right. So before we start today's session, I would want to show you something. So let me share my screen. Yeah. All right. So I'm sharing my screen. All right. So can you please hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
Am I
please.
on?
Yes, yeah, we
All
can
right.
hear you.
All right. Great. So this is my website. Okay. So this is the first website I built that I was using. Okay, so this website was built in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, what I'm teaching you currently. So everything you see here was built with HTML, CSS, and then JavaScript. All right, good. Yeah. And then I decided not to use this one again. Then I'm currently working on this one for myself. Now, this one is built in React. So React is a JavaScript framework to build websites. Okay. So I'm working on this one too. Yes. So I'm hoping that by the end of the session, you'll be able to build or design something like this. All right. So that's just by the way. Okay. So let's go back to what we were doing. So yesterday we built our NUGS-CHINA website, and then we had this result. Okay. So today what we are going to do is we are going to clean this up, okay, and then do something interactive. Okay, good. So I would want us to remove all the styles that we added to this HTML file today. Sorry, yesterday, and then we'll get a raw HTML file like this. All right, good. So yesterday I taught you how you are going to link your CSS file to the HTML. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again today.
So say,
And yes.
so please concerning the style CSS, please I want to ask the question a little short before you do it because yesterday I wanted to ask. Please, is it always can you create another or because I know that sometimes within the code within the same within the code you can call CSL or inside, or sometimes you have to create and on a different distance, or you can still put it inside the code, or you can have to create a new distance or so that it will work together. How does it go about it?
All right. I don't know. Someone's microphone is on. Can you mute yourself?
Please, can we mute ourselves, please?
All right. So you can add styles directly to your HTML file. It's good to do that. But to make things easier, okay, it is better you create a CSS file and then you write your styles in there. Now, the reason why we do this is that it makes the code cleaner and then easier to read. Now, in the software engineering world, it is all about we solving problems. We solve problems by writing code. Okay. Now, the code that you write, someone will be working with you on your code. All right. So it is always best to use the right convention by separating stuff, writing comment, writing different files, and then calling those functions into the main file, so that when someone comes to work with you on a project, it will be easier for the person to read and continue or work. It is also believed that you may leave work or stop working, or you will get sick or something, and then someone should be able to step in to help you. That is why it is necessary for you to separate your code, write comment so that it's readable and then editable. That is why we do that. So I'll create my CSS file. So like I said, I'll name it style.css. Note, you can give it any name that you want, but the CSS is the extension for creating styles. So any name.css. You create your CSS file. You come to the index.html. Inside the head tags, you define your link, rel, style sheet, and then you do your referencing, and then you insert your style.css. So now I have my CSS style file inside my HTML file. So now this is what we have as our CSS. Okay, good. So today we are not going to touch anything in our HTML file. We are going to touch only our CSS file. So today we are doing basically CSS. So this is the HTML. Now I want to show you the live preview. That's why I'm showing the document so that you see all the styles applying in real time. Good. So let me write a comment. So I'm writing a comment and then naming it a global change or reset. Or let me make it global changes. Good. Now I'll state my margin. Now in HTML, the asterisk targets absolutely every element on the page and resets the default spacing the browser tries to add. So we are going to use the asterisk. And then we use our curly brackets. Then we press enter. All right. Then we give our margin. So we type our margin and then we make it 0. Now, you realize that this one, the HTML changed its format and margins. So you realize that everything has been stacked up to the left and then up. All right. So we've stated our margin and then we do our padding. And then padding to, I'll make it 0. All right. So you realize that the lists, this one, the unordered list that we added to our HTML file yesterday, when I give it 0, you realize that it has also shifted to the left. So it has reset the bulletin points that was added. Okay. I'll also add something called the box sizing. Okay, good. So the box sizing ensures that padding doesn't affect the width. Okay, so box sizing, I'll make it border box. All right, good. And then I'll give it a font family. So in fonts, we have font size, font family, and a font style. So I'll name my font family. Mostly we use sans serif as our main font family. All right. Or you can choose the Sego UI, Tahoma, Geneva, Verdana, and then sans serif. Those are the most simpler ones that we use every day. So I can choose any of them, okay, and then you realize that the font has changed. All right, good. You can choose any other font you want, but this is what I want to use. Okay, good. Now, that is done. Okay, this is done. Now, let's work on the body. Okay, the body. All right, so you realize that we have a body tag here. Okay, good. So the body. So let me write another comment and then name it the body styling. So you have the body tag, so you can call the tag directly into the CSS file. So I'll name it body, and then I'll bring my curly brackets. Okay, and then I'll give it a background color. So background color, let's say I want to make it Alice blue or black or whatever. So I can choose the color I want. I can choose Alice blue, and then you realize that the background color has changed. Or you can choose to use the color codes. I like color codes. Why? Because we all have separate colors that we want to use in our website. For the website that I showed you previously, the first one, the one with the green and then the black, I used color codes. Why? Because I'm able to specify the kind of color element I want to use. If I just use green, it will give me a different kind of green that I don't like. All right. So in this case, I'm using a color code. So the color code I'm using is F3, F4, F6. So that I'll get something like gray or light gray or something. Okay, good. And then I'll give the color, the font color. So color, I also use color codes. So for that one, I'll do 1F2937. Okay, so that's the color code that I'm using. It's dark gray. Okay, that color is dark gray. And then I'll use a line height. So line height, I'll make it 1.6 so that the heights of the text are properly segregated. Okay. So you realize that if I do it 0, you realize that it's stacked up. If I do 1.6, you realize that there's spacing, actual spacing. Okay. So that is good. So the body is done. Now, let's work on the main container. So I'll make the main content, create a comment, main content, and then I'll call the main tag. So we have this main tag, okay? Yes. So in the main tag, I'll define something called the width, but I'll do max width, and then I'll do 1,000 pixel. Okay, so that's the width, the left and the right. I'll make it 1,000 pixels. And then I'll make the margin. I'll make it 40 pixel. All right, so you realize that since all the text has been stacked up to the left, I'll have to give spacing to the margin, okay, so that our things look nicer. So the margin, I can make it 40 pixel so that there's an absolute space, okay, and then I'll make it auto. All right, good. So it centers the main block on the screen. All right, good. And then I'll give it a padding of 20 pixel. All right, good. Or I can do 0.20 pixel so that it shifts up a little and then it moves from left to right. Okay, good. So that is that. Now let's work on the heading tags. Now you realize that you have H2, you have H1, we have Let me see. Do we have H3? Yes, we have H3. So I'm going to format it. Okay. So I'll call them. So since I'm going to apply the same formatting to all of them, I can do H1, comma, H2, comma, H3. And then I'll open my curly brackets. I'll do color. And then I'll use my color code 111827. And then, yes, I wanted to use margin bottom, and then it's done. Okay. So these are the styling, okay, for the header 1, header 2, header 3, the main content, the body styling, and then the global changes. Okay, good. We are not done. So this is just the basics, the fundamentals to styling, um the main stuff. Okay, but let's go on to adding more styles. Okay, good. So now let's work on the navigation bar.
Please,
So
we
we
can
are, he said,
not see.
you cannot see what? What can't you see? Hello?
Your screen is
I think the screen is too small, so it's very difficult for us to see. If you can enlarge it a bit.
Is this fine?
Still the same.
I have increased the size. So let's work on this, the navigation bar here. These stuff, the Web3 portfolio dashboard, the home, about, and then the contact. So that's our navigation bar. So we are going to align this one, and then we are going to align this one to make it look like the NUGS-CHINA website, aligning it from left to right rather than just listing them as points. It is not the most conventional way, so let's do that. So I'll create a comment and then I'll name it header and navigation styling. So I'll call my header. So this is my header tag. And then it has the Web3 portfolio dashboard, the navigation bar, the URL, the LI, and then the anchor tag. Good. So that is what we are working on. So I'll first give a background color for my header. So background color, I can use a color code. So let's see, I'm using 1E293B. But this one is too dark. So let me do I will not use a color code. So let me just make it.
I think the light green was good.
Are you sure?
Okay, this one too is not bad.
Let me make it something blue. Yeah.
You are from Chelsea.
Yeah, I'm a Chelsea fan.
That's right.
Yeah. So this is cool. And then I'll change the color. So the color, I'll make it white. So for white color codes, it's easier. can do FFF. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, FFFF. And then I will turn on the flex box so that it shifts. Okay. So let me write the comment flex box. And then I'll do display. I'll make it flex. Okay. So you realize that the home about contact has moved from below to the left, sorry, to the right side. Okay. So flex, all right, good. So this one is done. And then I want to make it horizontal. That's for the main axis. Okay, so I want to push the items to the opposite ends. Okay, so I'll write a comment and name it main axis. And then I'll define something called the justify content. So justify content, I'll make it space between. Okay, so you realize that the home about contact has been moved to the end. Okay, yes, to the end. All right, good. And then I'll do the cross axis, the vertical, and then center items vertically. Okay, good. So what I wanted to do has been done for me. So cross axis, align items, center. Okay, good. And then I'll write a padding. And I'll make it 20 pixel. So we realize that it has given space up on the header, all right? So 20 pixel, shift it down, and then 40 pixel, centers it. So you realize that instead of these items being stacked, it's properly centered for the header. Okay, good. So this is for the items in the header. Now let's work on the navigation on ordered list. So this one is our navigation tag, and then there's an unordered list inside. So in order to work on that, you can call the navigation tag, and then you call the unordered list tag, and then you open your brackets. Okay. Then you also give it a display of flex. Flex. So you realize that instead of it being vertical, it has changed from being vertical to horizontally aligned. Okay, so the display flex, and then I'll give it a gap between the home about and then the contact. So I'll give it a gap of, let's say, 30 pixel, 30 pixel, and I realize that there's a good spacing between them. Okay, good. Yeah, there's a spacing between them. And then when that is done, I would want to remove the bullet points. Okay, so for that one, it's absolutely simple. So you can do list style, and then you do none to hide the bullet points. Okay, good. So this, so oh shit, yeah. So you hide the bullet points. Let me write.
Come over that side again. How it is from vertical to hello. Hello?
Hello.
You come over the side where it changes from the vertical to the horizontal.
So if you want to do that, you can use the display flex. So that one changes from the horizontal to the horizontal aligned. So it's for the display flex. Yeah. So then we've been able to achieve a proper appearance for the header. All right, good. Now let's make changes to the anchor tags, the links in the tags. These are still blue, all right, because it has links embedded in them. So we want to make that one appear nice, all right. So we will check and then use this one, okay. So the anchor tag, it's in the navigation tag. So for that one, we will call the navigation tag and then we call the anchor tag and then we open our brackets and then we define the color. So the color and then I'll give it something white or light blue. So light blue or white, the color code is #9 3C 5FD. So this one is light blue. Yeah. And then there is still underline, okay? So that is where we use the text decoration. So text decoration, we choose none so that we remove the underline. So let me add a comment. Hide underline. Good. All right. So then we bolding this one. All right. So we will use the font weight and then bold. So we make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Or you can use bolder, but it's always better to use bold. Okay. So bold. Yeah. Then you see this one is static. The home about contact is static. It doesn't have any color when it doesn't change to any color when you hover the mouse pointer over it. So you will do something called transition. Okay. So the transition, and then you do color, and then you make it 0.3 SEs. Okay, good. So that it gives you a smooth hover transition. So you realize that, let me use this one and save it. Now you see I have added the transition, okay? But when I hover the mouse pointer on it, it doesn't change color. So that is where we add this function, the hover, so that it actually changes color when you hover the mouse on it. So we'll do the nav A. So we use the same function here, all right? The nav A, and then we call the hover function. The hover, we open our tag, and then we do color, and then we make it white. So hashtag FFFF, good. So that now when we hover the mouse pointer on it changes to what? White. So you realize that it is getting more interactive. Okay, good. Yeah. Any questions at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, my simple question is you look at the home, about, and contact. Can you make it in line with the web portfolio dashboard? Can you put
Yes,
it
we
on this?
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I want to know.
No, okay. Yeah, we can. Okay. All right. So we are still on the navigation bar, but I want us to try something. Which one should we work on? Let me see. The footer. We'll do that one later. Okay. I have an idea. Let's work on the table. I think that one has more stuff to work on. Yeah. So when you are done with everything, we will align this one. Yeah. All right. So let's work on the table. So table styling. Good. So the table styling, we will call the table tag, and then we give it a width. Okay. So width, we make it 100% so that it takes up the full container. Okay. So 100%. So magic. 100%. So you realize that the table has now widened. Now it's occupying the full screen. Okay, good. So the width. So let me write a comment. So yeah, 100% viewport width. Good. And then I will remove the borders. Okay, so we will use the border collapse. So border collapse so that in future when we are adding stuff, there wouldn't be double borders. Okay, so double borders collapse. Good. So you realize that the spaces in between them has been minimized. Okay, good. Then we give a background color. So yesterday someone was asking that can we add styles to the background color of the boxes and stuff. So we are doing that today as promised. So background color, I'll make it white. So FFFF. So you realize that it has changed to white. Okay. And then I'll give a border radius. Okay. So border radius. So that it gives it a rounded corner. So yesterday I talked about that. So border radius, I'll make it 8 pixels. So you realize that the corners has changed, is rounded now. Now let me make it like 20. So you realize that you now see the corners more rounded, okay? But this one is too much. So let me still make it 8 or 10. And I think 8 is fine. So 8, good. Then we move on to the keeping the rounded corners clean. So we use something called the overflow, okay? And then we choose hidden. Yes. Then we add a soft shadow to the table, okay? Yes. So for that, we can do box shadow. Okay. So I'll give it a 0 pixel for now, and then 4 pixel. So you realize that there's a black shadow beneath the table. I don't know if you can see it. And then I'll
Yeah,
make
we
it 6
can.
pixel. Yeah. So you realize that there's a shadow at the
Yes.
back of the box. Yes.
Mm.
And then we give it a color. So the soft shadow there, it doesn't really have to appear like visibly like this. So I'll define a color. So RGB, I'll use 0.1. So that's the simplest shadow color we mostly use. Okay, but you still see the shadow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, good, good, good. And then margin, I'll add a margin bottom and I'll make it 40 pixel. Yeah, so that it drops the space. Okay, yeah, good. So it gives a space for the content below. Good. So that's for the table, the whole table. Okay. Now let's work on the table head.
Yeah, before
Okay.
you proceed to the table head, if I can ask this. If you look at a table,
Okay.
it appears the label, I mean the heading labels are a bit away far from the inputs and direct. If you want it to be aligned exactly in correct line in terms of the column, how can you do it? That's the first one. And then the
Okay.
second one, you did mention earlier about the color codes. Is there any source where we can learn the color code, different color codes, or it is only limited to the codes that pop up when you input color or background color?
Oh no, it is not. It is not limited. You see, when you click on this one, okay, let's say we are adding colors. No, let's use the box shadow, for example. If you let's say let me no hold on, let's use this one, the hover for this one. You see, if you choose color here, you can type blue.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Now when you type blue, it gives you on hover blue, right?
Options, okay.
You can click this one, okay, and then you can click up here, and then it will change the color format for you. Okay, so it is not limited to the blue, red, and green. You can still choose to do this one, or you can open a website. Let me see. And then there's something called the hex color
Yes.
or the hex code. Yes,
Okay.
HTML color code. So when you click on this
Okay.
one, you'll get a site where you can learn the color wheel and stuff. So let me just paste this one into the chat. Yeah, good.
Thank you very
So
much.
it
And
is
then
not
the
limited.
table.
Yes. So the table, you can use the padding and then the head. We are moving there. That's why
Oh,
we are
okay.
not done with the table actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So
You can proceed. Perfect.
I
Thanks.
want us to take all of us through. Yes.
Sure.
Good. So in the table, we have the table headers here. The name, gender, age, city. Okay. So you define them. So TH and then TD. That's the table head and the table data. Okay. And then you give it a padding. So the padding will shift it from its original position, whether left to right or up to down, from up to down. So padding. So padding, you give it 15 pixel. So you realize that it's actually giving spaces. Okay. And then 20 pixel. Okay. So you realize that it has actually given spaces inside the cells. Okay. Good. So let me write a comment. So space and space in cells. Good. Good. Then we use the text align. All right. So text align. So left. So you realize that now the name, gender, age, and city is aligned
All right.
properly. You see, good. Or you can still choose center and then you center the table data too. All right. Yes. Then we do the border bottom. So we want to give a light gray line between the rows. So you realize that although you see it's a table, there's no line between them separating them. Okay. So we do the border bottom and then we make it 1 pixel solid. 1 pixel, and then I'll make it solid. Okay, then I'll give it the color code. So the color code, I'll make it like let me do light gray. I'll be E5E, E5E, 7EB. Yes. So there is a small light gray line in between them. All right, good. So now we have a proper you know, lines between them. Now, let's work on the headers itself. So I'll define the T head, and then I'll give it the background color, and then I'll give it a professional. Is someone speaking to me? So now we have a blue that matching with our headers. Sorry, our navigation bar. Okay.
Please use a lighter shade of the blue.
Eh.
Yes.
All right. Is this one okay?
No.
But I think the other one matched with the other one perfectly, or do you want something like
Yeah,
this?
something like this is fine. Yeah. Oh, it's too dark.
Okay.
It's now dark. Please, okay, you
Is
can
it
go
fine
on.
now?
It's okay. Yeah, it's fine. You can go.
All right. Okay. And then I'll change the color and then make it white. Good. So now our table looks nicer than that of yesterday's table. Yeah. Mhm. So coming. Let me this. So this is yesterday's table. And then we have today's table. So you see what CSS can do. So you realize that it's actually better for us to use the CSS to actually define the kinds of styles we want for our stuff. Okay, good. So now let me add a simple, background color to the table body. Okay, good. So I'll do T body and then table row and then hover. And then background color, I'll make it, let me change the color. Let me give it a light blue. So F8, FAFC. Yeah. So you realize that when I hover the mouse pointer, I realize that the rows actually change. Do you see the change? Let me increase the depth. So you realize that now when you hover, you know the kind of row that you are looking at. Okay. Good. Yeah. So I think this works. Oh no, let me yeah, so I think this one works. Yeah. So that's for the table. Any question up to this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, I noticed that while we have the city, there's so much space. Can it be closed after the
Okay,
city?
so yes, so you see that in here we expanded the width of the whole table. It's not only the city. Okay, let me see where.
Okay.
You see here, we
Mm,
expanded the width of the whole thing. So if I extend this one, you realize that it doesn't affect the city, it affects all the table.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
All
it
right.
is not the city only, it's the
Only
whole table. I expanded the
the whole
width so that
table.
you see the other yesterday someone was asking about responsiveness. Okay,
Yes.
if I apply only the width to the city column, you
Mm,
realize that if someone uses a smaller screen, you realize that the city column will have a bigger spacing and then the other spacing will be small. But I
mm.
realize that in this case, if I shift this one, you realize that it affects everything and then you see everything as it should be. You get
Sure.
it?
Sure. Sure.
Uh, so that is why um, I made it the 100%. Yeah. Any other question?
And please, the table I see margin bottom. Is there margin top too?
Yes, there is. There is.
Okay.
So see this one. You see, when I commented it out, you realize that the collecting user data has been shifted up. I wanted a space below it. That's why I used the margin bottom. So I can also use
Okay.
the margin top to also give a space up here. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You also did mention that it's better to use the CSS for these. So is it
Yes.
that the HTML also had the same similar function, or it can be used, but just that it's better for the to
Oh,
use the
yes.
CSS?
Oh, yes, you can actually write all your styles in here in
Okay.
CSS. All your styles
HTML.
here. But you see, in solving problems, you don't want stuff to be complicated for the person you are working with. So you have to
Mm.
separate it. Okay. In programming, there's something called the okay, well, I don't want to be much technical, but let's stick to this one. You see, like I said, it makes the code readable and then easier to solve problems when problems arises. So we separate it so that we will be able to you know, make things easier. You can write all your styles in here, but um the proper way requires you to separate it. Okay. Yes. All right. So we can move on. So I think we can work on the form now. Yeah. So we can work on the form. And then we work on the footer and then we'll be done for today. So we are working on this one. So form. So I'll give it a background color of white. And then I'll give it a pattern. Okay, pattern of, let's say, 30 pixel. So that it shifts from left to right and then comes in between. Then we do a border radius like we did. So border radius of 8 pixel like the table. And then we give it box shadow. So first we make it 0 and then give it a 4 pixel, 6 pixel, and then we define the color. So we just want to use this simple light gray. So basically I'm applying the same style that I did for the table. Okay. Please hold on. All right. So this is for the form, the whole form. Now let's work on the labels for the form. So label, 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 label. All right. So you're going to apply styles for the label. So label, and then I'll make it display, I'll make it block. Okay, so that it puts the label on its own line. Okay, so block. Good. So you realize that the labels are on its own line. Okay. Yes. And then I give a font weight. So a font weight to make it bolder or something. Okay. So I'll make it 600. So I realize that it's more visible. And then the margin bottom, give it spacing. So 5 pixel. So it spaces the labels. And then margin top. Someone asked margin top. So I'm giving it a margin top of 15 pixel. So yeah, it spaces it nicely. So that's for the label. Then I give the styling for the multiple inputs. Okay, so styling for inputs. Okay, good. So I'll call the input and then I'll call the type. So the type, the input type text. Then I'll close the square bracket, give it a comma, come down, and then input type number. So yes, let me change this one to number and then change this one to date like we have. Good. So the input type, we have this one is text, we have number and then date. Okay. Good. And then the